Hey, welcome to the Open House Show. It's your host, Jesse Meadow. This week we have a great show. We're going to be talking about some of the challenges that boarding programs are facing, both on their campus and in enrollment during these COVID situations. And, a lot of these schools, they have different approaches, they have different needs, they have different international to domestic. But today we're going to be talking with special guest Tyler Hart. He's at Villanova Prep in California, Villanova Preparatory School. So we're going to bring him on now, see what his perspectives are, and have some dialogue that hopefully everyone will find interesting. So here we go. Hey, Tyler, how's it going?
It's going well, Jesse, all things considered. Thank you very much for having me on today.
Of course, sunny California. Glad to be talking with you. Had a little bit of a late start today, but that's perfectly in line with your day over there. Was it just after lunch there?
Yeah, just had some chicken wings and fried rice for lunch today. Dinner is, the dining hall is a little bit different than usual, but we're excited. We just finished our first week of in-person learning last week. And yep, it's a wonderful 84 degrees outside.
Oh, you can't complain with that. We had a cold front in Florida move in, so now it's in the mid 70s, and I've got some pants on today instead of shorts, and we're getting into the winter months, unlike everyone else getting snow.
Yeah, totally. I hear you on that one. The evenings in October and November, they get cold, but we still have our sunny days, to be sure.
Awesome. So you've been at Villanova Prep, correct me if I'm wrong, over a decade, right, in different roles?
Yeah, I want to say this is year number 16. Wow. I started as a math teacher. I taught Algebra 2 and pre-calculus for 5 years. Did a lot of different things in those 3 years. I was the student activities director and handled the student council. I was chair of the math department for about a year and a half. And then I moved into admissions in fall of 2010. So that summer was my transition.
Okay.
And yeah, been in admissions ever since.
So, that's a long time still in admissions. What are some things that you've seen, at least maybe in your area, in as far as admissions is concerned, like how things have progressed, how things have changed? What are some experiences you've had over that long span of time?
Yeah, it has been interesting. For us, we're a day and boarding school with about 200 students, and on the day side, the fares have completely been eliminated. All the schools who hosted them in our areas essentially said nobody's coming, and so we're not going to do with them anymore. They're a lot of work for 4 families to show up, and more schools than families are showing up, and so we have had to really pivot and focus on-campus events, and which has worked out quite well for the residents because with boarding, you have tours coming through, and if you're able to really advertise, we have a STEM day, we have an international day. It felt like when we were really clipping it at a pretty good pace, we had something every month or so that we were advertising, that we were offering, so that families, if they're going to invest into travel, then they would be able to align themselves to something special that highlighted our campus.
Okay, yeah, that's great. That's great. There are definitely some strategies that are admissions is changing around just to deal with the situations that we're all currently dealing with right now. So when you say you have the boarders in-person learning, did you have the boarders are on campus as well?
Yeah, so we were unique, especially with, some of the other California boarding schools, a handful of them are only 10, 15 minutes from our school. Everybody shut down. For the most part, everybody, in the springtime called it quits, sent everybody home. A lot of them were on spring break when everything went down. But we actually kept our dorms open throughout the entire summer. So we had 30 students stay through the last day of school and do online learning for our 4th quarter. And then we had about 10 students, even 2 seniors who, with travel restrictions, didn't want to kind of gamble going home and not being able to come back for university in the fall. We stuck it out, and God bless some of our resident staff members who held down the fort. We had a good number of teachers come on campus and spend a day making a meal or, teaching the students how to make kind of their favorite meal, if you will, and other activities. But we pretty much did have a pretty solid bubble that we had created throughout the summer. And so then coming back online in the fall, we brought it back up to 30-something boarding students on our first day of school, though all of the learning was distance learning. So we had students in the dorm and then still zooming in. I would say about half the teachers did so from their classroom, and then the other half did it from their kitchen table, dining room table, living room, etc.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I would imagine, there's been a lot of talk, at least from what I've heard, where normally, campuses are closed for maybe not so much Thanksgiving, but definitely Christmas break, definitely spring break. Like the boarders, they don't have to go home, but they can't stay here, kind of thing. But this year, given all of the circumstances, like you were saying before, more to your point, they don't want to risk going home and not being able to get back in. So a lot of the schools that we're talking to, at least on the boarding side, are keeping those dorms open. What are you guys doing for the breaks?
Well, we already used that card, and so
Okay.
everyone's a little tired. And we announced a couple of weeks ago that if you're going home for Thanksgiving, even though we are back into in-person learning, if you're going home for Thanksgiving, you are welcome to stay home through the entirety of Thanksgiving, winter break, and then come back in January. So we're kind of letting the bubble go a little bit between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Really until January. But we have told our resident staff to go home, that we are going to have a solid Christmas break. And obviously that does leave a couple students in the lurch. And so we are already beginning preparations for a small homestay program, beginning to partner up with some of our day families in the area, and also some of our domestic boarding families if they want to go home with a friend to Los Angeles or up to San Francisco, etc.
So the students that are trying to, navigate this, are they mostly, is your boarding population mostly international students or predominantly domestic students? What does that picture look like?
Yeah, great question. So we have of 90 boarding students, we got about 20 from California, and then roughly, high 60s to low 70s international students from 15 different countries.
Okay. So that will be some definite visa requirements and standbys, and traveling for some of them. They'll definitely have to figure some of those things out. Actually, at the school that I left and was working with the residential life program for years, they actually have students that are coming in and from Brazil, where they had that little travel ban. They were actually going to Mexico through agents and staying there, doing their quarantine for 14 days, and then entering in this way. And I'll get to this question too, but it's so interesting to see, not just in your office as an admissions representative, but also the different pieces that go into enrollment, the agencies, the overseas businesses that bring kids in, get schools noticed. How are they, manipulating or taking advantage or getting the students, to where they're not stuck at home? They're able to come here into the States and really meet the needs of their students, just like they would with anything else. Have you heard of anything like that? What has been your interactions with these agencies, as far as the enrollment piece?
Sure. I think, so the interest is down, and, it goes without saying, the U.S. is a hot zone. And so a couple of folks have just kind of pumped the brakes, and they're waiting from just kind of seeing how things pan out. And that makes sense. So whether they're talking, deferring from fall 20 to 21, or, we're interested, but we're going to hedge our bets, kind of a thing. I believe, the travel, it was difficult for us to actually find that third country entrance. And so we had, I think, one student who was successful in arriving in that manner. Fortunately, by August, the ban for our students from Europe was lifted. Right. And so we were able to welcome our students from Spain, and we have a new student from Slovenia this year. And actually, even that parent got an exception. So he was able to travel with his son. But, from, I think, Korea, Japan, there weren't any issues. And Vietnam is the other one that's been difficult because, the fact that there's no direct flights. So that's been very hard for some of our students to get back. And so we're making do. Our teachers have actually answered the call with night classes. And so they're meeting up with our students who are stuck in time zones around the world, with, a 4:30 here in California is 8:30 in the morning. And then as well as, I think it's a 6 o'clock start time. So like an hour class, half-hour break, and then another hour class. And it's really up to the teachers to kind of organize their students together. If there's only one or two in a couple sections, they'll lump them together and find, we call it a combined class period, so that there are 3 or 4 students as opposed to 1 over here and 2 over there.
Wow, that's really interesting how you're able to do that. I mean, I guess, outside of international travel and international students are kind of their own animal, when you're talking about boarding. You also have the domestic piece that has a whole different array of complications, but not the same. So I guess, my question would be, how is Villanova Prep, how are you guys, getting around the issues of boarding population? Like, how are you kind of keep that going? How are you keeping that funnel moving for you guys coming into, obviously, retention for the current students and then new students that might be coming in either mid-year or next year?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to partnerships and collaboration. The 10, there's a good number of boarding schools here in California, close to 20, but there are 10 of which we are a part, have really banded together a number of years ago just because of the physical proximity between Los Angeles and San Francisco. And so, for many years, we had already collaborated on tours for consultants, international agents, placement counselors at some of our feeder schools. And we had a come y'all in the spring where there were 15 or so consultants. We'd hire a minibus and split all the hotel costs. They work their way from Los Angeles up to like the Santa Cruz, Monterey area, and then folks would continue on if they so chose into the Bay Area, San Francisco, and usually fly out from there. And so we pivoted virtually. Starting in May, we had a California boarding school kind of tour and seminar, just really honing in on weekend activities, boarding school life, how are we responding to, the COVID-19 pandemic, and really trying to instill the safety and safe, healthy, and mental well-being of our students. And so we've done 2 of those events so far. As a Catholic boarding school, there's the Catholic Boarding School Association, CBSA, and we have an event in a couple weeks for that. And then on the agent side, kind of pivoting back to the international for a moment, we've partnered with a couple area schools and an agent, for example, in Vietnam. And I think next week we have one with Mexico, where, we're each kind of given our 5 or 15-minute spiel about our school, having a Q&A for them. And then, if there are students who are interested, or if the agent has set something up, then we're interviewing, 6 or 7 students at the conclusion of that call as well. So it's funny because we used to make fun of, armchair recruiting, and now we're all trying to become masters of it.
Yeah. Well, you got to adapt to the times. And, if you're forced to sit in an armchair, God willing, we'll be the best at it. Yeah. And you definitely want to be, that's for sure.
Yep.
But no, that's really interesting, and that kind of goes to the point from before of how are these agents, being able to do that. So I'm guessing that the students are in person in their offices, or they just kind of set up the time for you.
Yeah, no, they set up the time, and everybody's just kind of virtually online. And in one that worked really well, the agent was in control. They were the host, and so they were letting the students in the waiting room and then kicking them out to kind of keep things moving along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can happen. We don't have that luxury when we were at the table.
No.
Sometimes you're just sitting there, you're watching all of these kids, families just go by, and you're like, hey, here's what else do you need to know? Here's my card. Let's follow up later.
Yeah, exactly. You're tugging the earlobe, hoping the organizer catches the hint.
So, that's an interesting piece. And, I wasn't so aware of that going on. I imagine just the sheer amount of cost that it takes. And I remember how much we spent to go travel around the world. I'm not so sure that there's not going to be elements of agencies doing this kind of thing in the future, even when things come back to normal. Not that I'm saying that there won't be any more, school fairs, but I think there might be, I would anticipate having some more of these virtual events because they're relatively, cost effective. You can get through to students, but you're not getting that in person. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I would say yes, but, I want to say this, God, it feels like it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. An association that shall remain nameless, tried to really break into the virtual fair world. And, it was with resounding crickets. There wasn't anyone who was in the room, the virtual room, so to speak. And we've seen that on the physical fair side. Sometimes it's gangbusters, and you walk away with, you wish you had that, second or third inquiry pad to fill out because you ran out of materials. And other times there are more schools than families in the room. And that has definitely been the case with the hit or miss with our events this year. There are, sometimes, when you advertise something or, you think that by taking more of a content approach and talking about a particular angle, it's maybe going to bring more of an interested audience, as opposed to, I think everyone's sick and tired of the virtual open house or the virtual tour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so what is chapter 2? What is chapter 3 of that conversation? And sometimes you get 75 to show up. I think we've had, with the California boarding schools, 200, 400 on a call. And then other times there are 4 who are on the call. And the fortunate thing is, while it's live and you may be disappointed that you're only talking with 8 people, it's, you're able to record it and then send it out if someone has that question about athletics, college counseling, IB, robotics, what have you. So now at least it's part of your digital library moving forward for maybe someone who lands on your radar a month or 2 from now.
Interesting. So, on the enrollment front, especially since you've been doing this, over a decade, where do you see the opportunity coming from next? I remember when I was there, we were always looking, where's that next market? Who's up and coming? Where is there going to be this influx of students coming to the States? You had your usual suspects, but then there was pockets that changed. When I was in boarding school, Japan was huge, and now China is huge. So that kind of thing comes and goes. Now we're experiencing COVID. There was no, in 2008, with the recession hit, there were a lot of avenues where it wasn't affecting so much. You were able to pull and sustain budgets by getting kids from here. But with COVID, everyone's affected, some worse than others, but everyone's affected. It seems to have been the biggest stoppage point for possibilities. On the back end of that, we get a vaccine, things become a little bit more normalized. Where do you see the opportunity first? Like where do you see that you might be saying, hey, this might be an area, this might be a country, international, that might be on sending students over quickest?
I think China was the game changer for us simply because of sheer volume, both in quantity and really in quality. I mean, there are great kids who have come to boarding schools, and I mean, there's immense amount of students studying in homestay programs, et cetera. And from a tuition revenue standpoint, it's just been incredible for just the industry at large. What is it? 44 billion in the United States and I think there's about a 500,000 people who international students who were affected by the travel restrictions that were put in place. And not to get too off topic for a moment, but looking into the crystal ball, there isn't going to be another country that really replaces that. And I think we really need to kind of move away from that mentality in general. From a pandemic perspective, we have been, life has given us lemons, I'll tell you that much. And I think what we need to do is just squeeze those and make as much lemonade as possible. We have actually doubled down on building relationships with those who are interested in our school. I had a colleague at another boarding school, talk about a concierge model, and that is really something that we are trying to embrace by introducing those who are interested in our schools, because that's never going to end. You're still going to have inquiries, whether they call or they email. There may be fewer of them, but that means you also have a little bit more time for each, and you should take each of those students who are interested in your school far more seriously than you ever have before. So, in discerning that proper match that we are all looking for, is the student a good fit for your school, and is the school a good fit for the student? By really diving into a more quality conversation and bringing others from the school community into the conversation sooner, we are really able to discern whether the student is a good fit. Let's keep on going. And hopefully they fall in love with the people, which we all know really make the boarding school, or let's get them to be no's as fast as possible. As a mentor director of admission here in Southern California said, I want to try and get those no's, the NO's, to be no's as fast as possible. I don't want to waste my time on students who are just not going to come to my school or are not a good fit for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So switching gears a little bit, let's talk on campus. You just started a week ago. I mean, you've had boarders the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Given everything that's been happening, what are some challenges that you've been seeing as far as mitigation is concerned? Like, how are you handling the boarding program? What are some things that you have set up? Obviously, in California, I would imagine that the state mandates are a little stricter than in some other places. Here in Florida, it's a little bit of the Wild West, to be honest with you. So how are you guys handling your boarders on campus?
It was kind of a BCAD approach and the realization for us was we can handle things in one manner and really have a pretty solid bubble that we're confident with until the day students come back. Mm-hmm. And once day students are commuting to and from, once we get the bus service up and running again, then it's going to be a completely different ballgame. And so I would say that we've taken a far more vigilant approach than even, some of our schools we're quite close with. From just a disinfecting perspective, every break before, in between our classes, we have 4 classes a day with the block schedule. It's a required 20-minute break, and they're going through and spraying classrooms, in between these socially distanced groups of anywhere between 3 or max 14 students, and classrooms are in there. Everybody's out. All the teachers are out. We call it the wingtips. You can't touch wing to wing when you have your arms spread out. And mask wearing is huge. There's really 3 reasons why you should be taking off the mask, and one of them is or 2 of them are obvious. So we're on 130 acres. Students are really able to spread out. You want to take a mask and be outside, then go walk the track, get far, far, far away, and then of course you can remove it. But I think it takes constant reminders. We knew that once the day students came back, showing each other those funny little memes on their screens are one of the few reasons why they would be close to one another. But we've taken a constant and gentle reminder approach to that, rather than being punitive.
And, I have to say, I've been surprised. I mean, I shouldn't say surprised. Working with the students, they always showed, resiliency in different ways. Sometimes it was against you as the dean, and then sometimes it was for you. But in this case, and I said this on the last show, the kids that I've been hearing about, the schools we've been talking to, they really just want to be on campus. They really want to interact with their students. They know and remember what spring was like, not being there, being fully virtual. And by and large, from what I've heard, they're really just taking the kind reminders, but they're doing their best to take it seriously as much as a teenager could, so that they don't lose any opportunity to be around their friends.
And exactly that. I think, in your and my lifetime, we've never had society, the students clamor and desire to go to school. We've all experienced kind of summer, the dog days of summer. It gets a little bit longer and you're like, okay, I could be ready for this to start up. But there's been such a great desire for the students to come back to school. And I just got an email from a parent over the weekend, and she was just praising how excited her 15-year-old son was. I got to ride the bus. I got to eat lunch with my friends, which he hadn't done in months, and I got to blow things up in chemistry class. And for a 15-year-old boy, with our fantastic chemistry teacher who's a retired professor, if there were 3 ingredients you'd call the recipe of success of a successful school day, I guess we hit all 3.
That'd definitely be one of them. I loved blowing stuff up in science class. It was one of my favorite things to do. So I definitely feel him on that. But so good transition. You just started back up. Everyone's excited. What's it like in Southern California? I know in some states, in Florida, independent schools don't necessarily have to follow mandates so much. I know in California that is not the case. They're kind of thrown in there. If something's closed, you guys are closed. So what is the pulse of Southern California these days?
Yeah, July 17th, I think those of us in California will never forget the governor's mandate that just shut down schools and said we're all starting online. It was kind of the domino effects had happened a couple days prior. And with that came a new approach to kind of the monitoring systems, if you will. And it's completely county by county. And so fortunately, we are just north of Los Angeles. We're about an hour north of Los Angeles. So outside of LA County, just above that is Ventura County. And so Ventura County, it's a quiet suburb is what it is. And so it's a combination from a mentality standpoint of people taking it very seriously and being very respectful and wearing masks to, essentially the disbelief because we haven't really seen the seriousness of this yet. And yet, the suburbs really do create a fantastic kind of social distancing in and of itself. And quite frankly, the majority of Ventura County is the Los Padres National Forest that starts 5 minutes from our school. And so I think we haven't really had an issue in our area, particularly then you really hyper-focus on the Ojai Valley, which has a population of 25,000, even though we're 15 minutes from the beach and 15, 20 minutes from 500,000 people, which is where a sizable number of our day students are from. But we've been okay. And with the tiers, that was the reason why we were able to move into in-person learning. Was because our numbers were in great decline, and it has actually continued up until just a couple of days ago when they kind of have hit a pause button, but we haven't seen an increase with this third wave that's in the news right now.
Okay. And I guess, obviously trying to navigate the future as best you can, those numbers start to go up. You have the possibility of everyone back on virtual?
Yeah, so we're in a hybrid model right now. So we have half of our day students coming Monday, Tuesdays. We don't have class on Wednesdays because all of our teachers are, most of our teachers have those night classes that I mentioned earlier. So in order to kind of mitigate screen time in general, Wednesday is your time to kind of focus on homework and catch up for the week and for teachers to prep. And then cohort number 2 is coming to campus on Thursday and Friday. So, we are in hybrid for the fall semester, and we have fantastic social distancing with that. In January, depending on how things are, obviously that's a couple months away still, we may start with hybrid. We may be able to bring back all of our students and then just have half of them sitting out on the grass while the other half are in the classroom, and then kind of split that block, kind of a first half, second half. Or God forbid, the numbers increase, then we're back online for a certain amount of time.
Interesting. Okay. I like the cohort schedule. We've had some that, were hybrid in the sense that, some of the day students stayed at home completely. And then some of them were in class and they were there for a few days. Then they went home, and they just have all these different tracks. And, on one end of it, you look at it and say, as a college preparatory school, like you're trying to get them ready for that next level. That's quite common, even pre-COVID, to have schedules like this and, to give them that flexibility. For a teenager, it's going to be hard for them to navigate, but with the support that independent schools have, that individual attention, those kind of things, you can still be successful with such a unique high school experience, I guess, in this way.
Yeah, I think virtual has been adequate, and yeah, you're right. I think with the small school environment, the independent school mantra, we have really focused on not just the students' academics and providing a lot of grace to make sure that they are doing as well as they can, all things considered, but also from the social emotional aspect as well, because let's not forget that at the end of a Zoom call or a video chat, you end that thing and the student is still by himself in his bedroom, and he has been for months. And so to have that check-in and to really spend a lot of that, some of that classroom time, not on math, not on history, but on how's everybody doing today? Let's break out in the Zoom room so we can have some personal one-on-one, FaceTime, if you will, just to make sure that everyone's, got a little bit of sunshine in their life.
Absolutely. That's actually an interesting point. There have been a huge emphasis on the mental health of students and trying to get them through that, and that's all the way up to college. Schools investing in that kind of thing. How have the counselors, the health counselors, or even the teachers? I remember. It's great that a lot of these. A lot of these schools have all these health counselors and they're always available and you should feel comfortable going to them. But I remember my experience at independent school, like you had those one or two teachers that you just had that personal connection with. And while they might not be the professionals, they are the safe space that you kind of go to. So, how are the health counselors dealing with this virtually over at the Villanova Prep, and in part the teachers, like you said, taking that time with the students and saying, hey, how are things going with you? How's that been working out over there?
Yeah, so fortunately, we actually were introducing a new class this year called Seminar. And it was a complete rebuild of our school day because our students have 7 classes this year. They have 8. And Seminar is that 8th class. And so we had partnered with Project Wayfinder out of Stanford University to really kind of serve as that curriculum for the social emotional well-being of our students. And I think Getting Things Done for Teens is another book that the counselors have brought in. We've always had as part of our curriculum the 7 Habits of a Highly Effective Teen. But to have a dedicated seminar class during the school day for the students, some of the work asynchronous and others obviously synchronous. But it's really been something for the students to just pause and not think about their academics, but instead think about, how are they personally doing right now? How are their friends doing? How are things at home? As well as, maintaining a sense of focus on the future and the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, definitely need to focus on the future. I mean, that is all teens do anyways. And when that starts getting bleak and unknown, that's where things can get, really lost on them when there's not sense of that light at the end of the tunnel and perspective to keep that light at the end of the tunnel.
But even the addition of conditioning for sports. I mean, in California, all of our sports seasons got pushed to January, and fingers crossed that we're going to be actually able to compete at some level. But just the fact that the students were able to come to campus for 1 hour, socially distanced, see each other, and get some exercise. I think was something we were able to instill about a month ago, and it was a game changer for a good number of students who parents had kind of said the smiles are few and far between, but now they've got a little bit more life in them.
Interesting. I would imagine that has a huge effect on them. But last thing, I guess, anything surprise you? Throughout this whole ordeal? I mean, you've been in the biz for 16 years there at that single school and, 10 years in admissions. The biggest surprise, for us was obviously this COVID boom, that we talk about and we hear about from schools all over the country with their public school systems not having it together, or they're going all virtual by mandate. And, the independent schools don't have to. They got this huge late summer enrollment boom. And, it's not all schools, but that was probably the biggest surprises that we've heard. But, what about you? Anything you saw that might be something surprising that came out of all of this?
Man, well, I think so. From the COVID boom perspective, we did get a couple of students both on the day side as well as the resident side. But when I mentioned July 17th earlier, that really was, that put the kibosh on any of the interest, because it was like, okay, well, they live on campus, but you're still going to be zooming into the classroom that's 300 yards away. Like, yeah,
right. Yeah.
Man, I think I've been caught saying on more than one occasion, every week is a new adventure. And it feels like every week there is something to be nimble, to be flexible. We talked about resilience, and now we don't have time to talk about resilient. We just are, because we have to be. I think we do need to maintain focus on the the K recovery, where those of us who were able to just work remotely, things have remained relatively the same. We're blessed to continue having work and having jobs and maintaining kind of a semblance of normalcy, if you will. But then there are, we're blessed, for example, with the iPad program that our students have, and it's not, the 5G network or 4G network. So, Wi-Fi, connected to the classroom, the transition for us was seamless. But we do need to pay attention to the greater good. And I'm not talking about just so we can end this thing, but, the loss of jobs, all of our schools really tout a service perspective. Well, what are we doing in order to help folks who have experienced homelessness, job loss, who don't have the Wi-Fi to participate in schools? So I think that for us right now, it's a conversation that we're having and reminding our students in terms of kind of, to be fortunate, but we do need to be mindful of how we can help people in need. So we don't have any initiatives we've identified yet, but that is certainly a conversation that we are having both at a class level and admin level and within our campus ministry program as well. So really got to focus on the greater good of society because a lot of people are hurting right now.
Yeah, and definitely with election season going on, that doesn't make the energy in the air that much easier for folks. And I got to say, I hope that more schools, more administrators take that approach because that is a very impactful statement that will do a lot of good for people at your school. And you know what? For most independent schools within their community, because for most independent schools, their involvement is not just within their own school community, but the near community around them, and they can do a lot of good for everyone that's around them, and really help their brand. If you want to talk business about it with that kind of mentality and helping people. So I'm definitely going to leave it there. That's a nice high note to end this with. So I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time. We've gotten some great insightful answers. I feel a lot more confident in what's going on in Southern California now that I've talked to you. So I appreciate the time. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and let's keep the numbers low down there so you can keep that in person going on, and hope for the best.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on, Jesse. Certainly appreciate the conversation.
See you, Tyler. Thank you. Well, that does it for us today. See you next week. Same time, same place. Everyone be safe.